Almost all of the pieces of software in our lab, be it a web server like LC AutoFit or a database like MIMEDB and HMDB, are what we call web apps. Web apps are ubiquitous around the modern internet today because it allows you to reach millions of users with little overhead. All the users need is access to the internet.
What do you mean? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
But you know, I think about this, and what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage. Companies are there, the latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
In the late 1960s, the US Department of Defense created the precursor to the internet called the ARPANET. It used a novel method of packet switching for data transmission, which essentially broke down the data into smaller chunks like puzzle pieces and reassembled them at the destination. ARPANET used the NCP protocol to communicate among the computers in its network, which consisted of only universities and research institutions in the USA. Then in 1983, the internet was officially created. When NCP got replaced by TCP, TCP essentially works like a handshake between computers. The handshake consists of 3 steps of packet exchange called SYN, SYNAC, and ACK, after which a reliable connection is established between the 2 computers. It allowed data to travel across multiple pathways, increasing efficiency and fault tolerance.
Stewie. Yeah? It's not your fault. What? It's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault. I know. No, Stewie. It's not your fault. Don't do this to me, man. Not you, man. It's not your fault. Screw you. Cut it out, man. It's not your fault. Why is it so hard? I didn't know it was gonna be so hard.
TCP was part of the Internet Protocol Suite, which standardized the way these computers communicate. It uses unique IP addresses to identify the source and destination computers. If the computer is a web server, its IP address could be mapped to a unique domain name via the Domain Name Service. Registrars like Google Cloud or DigitalOcean provide this service, but must be accredited by ICANN, which is a non-profit to oversee namespaces on the internet. Famous computer scientist Tim Berners-Lee introduced URLs and URIs, which are unique representations of each resource available on an IP address. For example, you could have an URL that looks like this to get the entire submission number 631 resource. You could also have a more specific URI that looks like this to get the associated chromatograms only. All locators are identifiers, but all identifiers are not locators. He also invented HTML, which is a markup language for defining the structure and basic behaviors of the UI elements on a web page. You start out by defining the document type and the language, then define the head tag, which contains some metadata like the character encoding to use and the title, and then the body tag, which contains the actual elements you see on the page. There are various types of elements like the H1 tag, the P tag, which is just a paragraph, the form tag to create forms with special input elements. To create drop-downs, use the select tag and specify the options. Additionally, he also created HTTP, which is another protocol for transferring data over a network, but at the application level. With domain names and URIs to locate and identify resources, HTTP for an application to reliably leverage the TCP/IP layer of computers for data transmission, and HTML to render the data onto a web page, we get the World Wide Web in 1989.
We have technology.
And exactly 30 years ago, the first browser Netscape was released.
Go online at work or while working at home? Next time you're on the internet, go to the new Netscape.com. Faster searches, instant messaging, a customized start page. The new Netscape. Power and ease of use. It's free at Netscape.com.
As you can see, the number of internet users skyrocketed between 1994 and 2020 thanks to browsers. The browser as a client sends HTTP requests to another computer called a server. The server looks up the routing table for the appropriate controller methods. In this route, the browser is requesting the status of a submission, so I grab the correct submission object using the supplied ID from the request payload from a database like MySQL and then respond with a JSON object containing the submission ID, status, and progress. Notice the use of an ORM layer rather than using direct SQL statements, because SQL injections are still one of the most common types of cyber attacks. Once the browser receives a response, it can use it to update the HTML of the page using JavaScript, because HTML only defines the bare bones structures, while JavaScript makes it do things, and CSS or cascading style sheets make them look nicer. Which brings us to module bundlers. They package these things together so that they actually work in a browser. And that's how web apps work in 39 concepts.